What are you talking about? Ooh.
Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Tarpon Springs, located in the heart of the walkable Tarpon Springs Historic District and known as the home of the Innes paintings. We are a liberal community for all ages, promoting spiritual growth, social justice, and the arts. I'm Reverend Kristina Spaude, minister here of UUCTS. I'm glad you are here. I hope that you find meaning in today's service. Please consider joining us on a Sunday morning when we gather to worship as a community every week beginning at 10:30 a.m. on Zoom, or drop in for a more personal visit to one of our coffee hours starting at 11:30 on Sundays on Zoom. If you are new to the area or just learning about Unitarian Universalism, we'd love to meet you in one of our newcomer discussions, which are held on the second Sunday of each month at 12:15. Please refer to our website for information about how to connect with us on Zoom. Our service associate will now begin today's service. Let us enter this sacred time with open minds and open hearts.
Hello, and welcome to our virtual service today. My name is Jean Nelson. We would like to thank our minister, Reverend Kristina Spaude, for her words today as she talks about chaos or community. We would also like to thank Bonnie Whitehorse for the music she brings us today, and all those who help behind the scenes to bring you this service. Our opening words and chalice lighting for today are by Erica Hewitt. The word courage comes from the Latin cor, which means heart. According to the poet Mark Nepo, the original use of the word courage meant to stand by one's core, a striking concept that reinforces the belief found in almost all traditions that living from the center is what enables us to face whatever life has to offer. To encourage means to hearten, to impart strength and confidence. This is our work as a religious community, to encourage one another, to be bold in engaging the world around us, as well as what scares us internally, to give one another the confidence and heart to live as fully as possible. With full hearts, we affirm our relationship with each other. We recognize our agency and our connective power, and we accept our responsibility to be bold and courageous. We light this chalice, symbol of all that we are, all that we have done together, and all that we will be, as our shared ministry encourages those within and beyond our walls.
Our story today is called Walking with the Wind. This is an adaptation by Karen G. Johnston of a story in the prologue of John Lewis's memoir of the same name. Representative Lewis passed away in July 2020. This is a true story told by a great leader who had done much to bring about justice in our nation. He had lived a long and full life, asking of himself and asking of all of us to show up for justice, to do what we can and just a little bit more, to make sure there was more fairness for all in our country. John Lewis grew up in a large family, and he would spend time with his aunts and uncles, with his siblings and cousins often. There were many children in the neighborhood he grew up in, and they would all play together. Mr. Lewis tells a story about a time when he was playing outside his Aunt Suneva's home with about 14 other children when a big storm arrived, the kind of storm that made him very afraid. He recounts, Aunt Suneva was the only adult around, and as the sky blackened and the wind grew stronger, she herded us all inside. Her house was not the biggest place around, and it seemed even smaller with so many children squeezed inside. Small and surprisingly quiet. All of the shouting and laughter that had been going on earlier outside had stopped. The wind was howling now, and the house was starting to shake. We were scared. Even Aunt Suneva was scared. And then it got worse. Now the house was beginning to sway. The wood plank flooring beneath us began to bend. And then a corner of the room started lifting up. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. None of us could. The storm was actually pulling the house toward the sky, with us inside it. That was when Aunt Suneva told us to clasp hands. Line up and hold hands, she said, and we did as we were told. Then she had us walk as a group toward the corner of the room that was rising. From the kitchen to the front of the house we walked, the wind screaming outside, sheets of rain beating on the tin roof. Then we walked back in the other direction as another end of the house began to lift. And so it went, back and forth, 15 children walking with the wind, that trembling house down, being held down with the weight of our small bodies. Can you imagine what it was like to be inside of that house, afraid that it might fall all apart from the destructive force of the wind and the rain from the whole storm? Thank goodness John Lewis wasn't alone, that he was there with friends and family. Thank goodness they figured out a way to work together. When Mr. Lewis was much older and was writing down the story of his whole astounding life, he wrote these words. More than half a century has passed since that day, and it has struck me more than once over these many years that our society is not unlike the children in that house, rocked again and again by the winds of one storm or another, the walls around us seeming at times as if they might fly all apart. It seemed that way in the 1960s at the height of the civil rights movement, when America itself felt as if it might burst at the seams. So much tension, so many storms. But the people of conscience never left the house. They never ran away. They stayed. They came together and they did the best they could, clasping hands and moving toward the corner of the house that was the weakest. And then another corner would lift, and we would go there. And eventually, inevitably, the storm would settle, and the house would still stand. But we knew another storm would come, and we would have to do it all over again. And we did. And we still do, all of us, you and I. Children holding hands, walking with the wind.
Yonder come days are breaking. Yonder come day, oh my soul. Yonder come days are breaking. Sun is rising in my soul. Yonder come days are breaking. Yonder come oh my soul. Yonder come days are breaking. Sun is rising in my soul. Rise up, singing. Days are breaking, oh my soul. Rise up, singing. Days are breaking in my soul. Yonder come days are breaking. Yonder come oh my soul. Yonder come days are breaking. Sun is rising in my soul. Rise up, singing. Days are breaking, oh my soul. Rise up, singing. Days are breaking in my soul. Days are breaking in my soul. Days are breaking in my soul.
Our words for inspiration today come from Denise Levertov. This is called Goodbye to Tolerance. Genial poets, pink-faced, earnest wits, you have given the world some choice morsels, gobbets of language presented as one presents T-bone steak and cherries jubilee. Goodbye, goodbye. I don't care if I never taste your fine food again. Neutral fellows, seers of every side. Tolerance, what crimes are committed in your name. And you, good women, bakers of nicest bread, blood donors, your crumbs choke me. I would not want a drop of your blood in me. It is pumped by weak hearts, perfect pulses that never falter, irresponsive of nightmare reality. It is my brothers, my sisters, whose blood spurts out and stops forever because you choose to believe it is not your business. Goodbye. Goodbye. Your poems shut their little mouths. Your loaves grow moldy. A gulf has split the ground between us, and you won't wave. You're looking the other way. We shan't meet again unless you leap it, leaving behind you the cherished worms of your dispassion, your pallid ironies, your jovial, murderous, wry-humored, balanced judgment. Leap over. Unbalanced? Then how our fanatic tears would flow and mingle for joy.
Spirit of life, come unto me. Stay in my heart all the stirrings of compassion. Blow in the wind, rising the sea. Move in the land, giving life the shape of justice. Roots will be yours, wings set me free. Spirit of life, come to me, come to me. There was a man in America who had a dream
It's time for the offering for the work and the welfare of this church. Please go to our website, uutarpon.org, and click on the donate button. Or please send your checks to 57 Reed Street. The entire address is right there on your screen. And thank you.
If I can help somebody as I pass along, if I can cheer somebody with a word or song, if I can show somebody he is traveling wrong, then my living shall not be in vain. Then my living shall not be in vain. Then my living shall not be in vain. If I can help somebody as I pass along, then my living shall not be in vain. If I can do my duty as a good person ought, if I can bring back beauty to a world abroad, if I can spread love's message that the Master taught, then my living shall not be in vain. Then my living shall not be in vain. Then my living shall not be in vain. If I can help somebody as I pass along, then my living shall not be in
The morning of November 9th, 2016, I remember walking into work 5 weeks into my chaplaincy residency. I went to bed early enough the night before to still have had some hope, but woke up to a world where I could no longer deny the fact that we were indeed who I was afraid we were. The air in the office that morning was so thick, it was like swimming, trying to move through it. We were about a dozen staff across the political spectrum, and people could barely speak. The other white women were crying quietly off and on. We gathered for our morning staff meeting, and it was hard. We were chaplains, social workers, therapists, peer support specialists, people skilled in communicating and being with other people. But that morning, it was a dense slog. We were all grieving. As a nation, we had been here 1,000 times before, maybe more. Of course, if you're white like me, you may not have known it. But Black, Indigenous, and people of color, women, disabled folks, queer folks, so many people on this stolen land have experienced this over and over again in the last 500 years of colonization. Perhaps, though, it had never been with this combination of bad on the scale of fascism and white awareness of its presence, now in the most powerful position in the country. Today and tomorrow, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. is being celebrated across the country. I want to focus on the later king, the woke king, the king who called not only for justice, but for equity, for freedom, for the beloved kingdom to become real here and now by our labor, called by new visions and understandings. The king who had tired of white liberals like me, had been betrayed by them. The king who asked in his final book, written in 1967, "Where do we go from here? Chaos or community?" With all that he accomplished in his too short life, including the most noted signing of the Voting Rights Act in 1965, among many other things, it wasn't until the Voting Rights Act, as white liberals began en masse to abandon civil rights causes and feel that what they had accomplished was enough, that King found himself finally, truly confronted with the undeniable and unapologetic sin of this country, white supremacy, and that it would not be undone by anyone, least of all a Black man, without the same violence it has unleashed since Columbus had mistakenly found his way here. It's the post-Voting Rights Act king who experienced America as it really was, not always the mean Bull Connors America, or even the white liberals disappearing from beside him America. It was when King went to California, experienced the Watts riots, that he began to understand that the organizing, boycotting, marching, civil disobedience would only ever get so far, no matter how often he had been linked arm in arm with white liberal clergy, politicians, and others. Because white supremacy is so strong that it will return all gains with a deeper fury, like the storm John Lewis experienced as a child. And that fury will ensure that white people will act in its favor by siding with whiteness and its ideals, regardless of the way a person's reality diverges from such an image. The way white people felt enough work had been done. The way poor white people identified themselves more strongly with middle class and even rich white people than other poor folks of different ethnicities. The power of whiteness is so strong. It is this king who understood the true American dream: allegiance to the cause of white supremacy, regardless of cost. It is this king who, at the Ware Lecture of 1966, at our own General Assembly, King pleaded with us, Unitarian Universalists, friends, allies, teachers, and mentors, that our faith not sleep through the revolution. If you're hoping for a happy ending here, I'm going to tell you, we too ignored his vision, even in the wake of his murder, with the white empowerment issue of 1969 and 1970. We didn't understand the need to do our own work while working for justice in the world. We resisted the need to do our own work so hard and so actively that we have only begun to engage it in the last few years. There is nothing more tragic than to sleep through a revolution, King said in that lecture. Perhaps it was too obvious to be spoken, but still needs to be named now, today, that there is indeed one thing more tragic: to live through a revolution on the wrong side, or just on the side. We UUs mostly manage to be in one or on the other. We UUs as a whole have been so invested in our whiteness and white supremacy, as well as our unexamined adjacency to it, that we have caused harm not only to ourselves as a faith, but to many individuals. Perhaps now, 53 years after his murder, we can heed his calls to us specifically and to us as American people. Shared with his friend Harry Belafonte not long before his death, King said, "I've come upon something that disturbs me deeply. We have fought hard and long for integration, as I believe we should have, and I know we will win. But I have come to believe that we are integrating into a burning house. I'm afraid that America has lost the moral vision she may have had. And I'm afraid that even as we integrate, we are walking into a place that does not understand that this nation needs to be deeply concerned with the plight of the poor and disenfranchised. Until we commit ourselves to ensuring that the underclass is given justice and opportunity, we will continue to perpetuate the anger and violence that tears the soul of this nation. I fear I am integrating my people into a burning house." When asked, what then do they do? King's response was that we become the firemen. It is the burning house that white America built and defends at all costs, except when we are actively fighting against it, when we are the people working to put out that fire and tear down the house. King was beginning to realize, first in traveling west, then north, that the problems that he had experienced in the South were superficial in comparison to those elsewhere. that the problems of America were far wider and deeper than he had understood, that they were even as wide and deep as contemporaries Malcolm X and James Baldwin had been telling all who would listen. Toward the end of his life, King was realizing two things that impacted how he did his justice work. One, that the poor and disenfranchised needed to be part of the movement and that their basic needs had to be met. And two, that with the signing of the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act, white America believed its work was done. As white Americans moved away from the justice work that King called for, an extension of the coalition building and partnering he had done throughout his career, focus was lost and chaos ensued. And King was dreaming and strategizing about how to make community from that chaos. King was struggling, wrestling with how to move forward. He envisioned a Poor People's Campaign, which he and the Southern Christian Leadership Conference began planning in November of 1967. It was a strategy that would both serve to rekindle coalition building and foster community building across a particular and different identity than he and the SCLC had previously engaged, attempting to unite Americans by class. It is arguable that it is this transition that caused King to be murdered less than 5 months later. King was coming to understand in his own bones why Malcolm X and James Baldwin had called repeatedly for attention to be turned to the Black community. Malcolm X had called for separatism to allow Black folks to focus attention, energy, and resources on each other, to build each other up. Baldwin, never really an activist, but always a witness, recorder, critic of white supremacy and champion of Black people, too, continued to encourage Black folks to find strength and support in each other. I've learned a lot from these men, as I have learned a lot from AA, about the power of fellowship, for one. So I understand, in some sense, the strength that comes from being linked arm in arm, one to another. AA also taught me some points that are relevant to this moment as well, that feed and fuel each other, about absolute clarity of purpose, about knowing who you are and who you serve, as well as about being mission-driven. These are the same lessons that King was learning during this time and carrying into his own work. And it is these lessons from King, Baldwin, and Malcolm X that are so timely for this moment in history and in our lives as individuals and as a nation. I am a student of history, among other things. Over and over again, we have seen the scenarios play out both in the United States and elsewhere. It is the story of white America. We take and take. We propose compromise or limitations. If we can just have, and then turn around and take some more. Our nation's history writ large looks like the Trump presidency has. Do something audacious and horrible, people will protest. There's a bit of a pullback from the thing, but never an apology. And the next time, worse. constantly pushing us further toward fascism, giving over more and more. And here we are, days following a coup on the Capitol, impeachment proceedings starting again. Members of Congress who were in lockdown, heavily armed pseudo-militants storming and entering the building, sometimes with the aid of the officers charged with protecting it. A gallows built, noose hung, standing outside, waiting for use. Members of Congress and their staff in lockdown, with a number of them not wearing masks in the middle of this global pandemic, creating what may be another super spreader event. And there are calls for healing, for reconciliation, for moving on. Friends, gallows are not meant for healing or reconciliation or moving on. Those who have aided and abetted this situation, the individual people, the party, the politicians, the corporate media. This is the culmination of more than 4 years of increasing escalation to this point, with concession after concession, normalizing after normalizing of horrible behavior in the name of civility, balance, and fairness. Goodbye to tolerance. No more. If we are to survive this, if our democracy is to survive this, the time is now. We must act to build the world we dream about, not allow fear to make it for us. I am a prison abolitionist, and we need these people to be held accountable, starting with prison sentences. We need to denounce what they have done. We must be clear that this is the truth. This is reality. This is not something that can be argued, nor will it be tolerated. They must be held accountable in a court of law. Perhaps later they should be required to complete a lifetime of community service work, and they must be held accountable for their actions in every way that we can think of, with no possibility of ever serving in public office. And these actions must be on record, that any time they might seek employment, employers would know who they are and what they have done. We must teach ourselves and our children that such things will not be tolerated. We will have no more tolerance for the intolerant, lest we return to this moment. The time for both sides-ism, moderatism, conciliatory gestures is far gone. I do not wish violence. I wish accountability. We give no more, and when they seek to take, we take them to court. The door will always be open for them to join us, to repent for the error of their ways, for the violence committed, for the terror created, for the lives taken, for the damage done. And what we must do now is care for each other. We must bring order to the chaos and do the work of building a community as King did. We may forget that he was always part of a movement, building coalitions and working in partnership with others. We must do the same. Better. We must find the people who have been doing the work and support their efforts. Stacey Abrams has shown us both how to do this and how effective it is when we do. And we must do our own healing of the terror of these last 4+ years especially, but of the last 500 years. Truthfully, deeply, in relationship, in humility, my people who are white like me. Learning to use our power and privilege where we have it as a shield, as protection, while lifting the more marginalized and oppressed up and following them. We must turn toward each other, to the work of love being done in this world already. We will work together, hand in hand, arm in arm, and we will build each other up so high. We will build such strength in numbers and depth. We will feed and care for each other, watch each other sleep, fight for health care and access and education and living sustainable wages for all. Rights for what it means to live a decent human life. We will move money, resources, infrastructure, power to the people doing this work. We will use our power to lift each other up so that we all may rise. And we will learn not to tolerate each other, but to deeply love each other, to celebrate what it means to be Black, Indigenous, a person of color, to be queer, LGBTQIA+, to be disabled, neurodivergent, to be white, cisgender, to become trauma-informed, to tell the truth, no matter how it hurts to do so. To be an accountable, growing, loving relationship. We are bound together in this life. When we learn to embrace these bonds, we will make the beloved kingdom possible so that we can all be free. And we must do so as if our lives depended on it, because they do.
Love will guide us, peace has tried us, hope inside us will lead the way on the road from greed to giving. Love will guide us through the hard ride. If you cannot sing like angels, if you cannot speak before thousands, you can live from deep within you. You can change the world with your love. Love will guide us, peace has tried us, hope inside us will lead the way on the road from greed to giving. Love will guide us through the
James Baldwin said that hope is invented every day. And in The Gift of Faith, Jean Harrison Nuyar has written, in the lore of ancient China, there is a story of a philosopher who was asked, where is the road called hope? He replied, it does not exist, but as people move forward upon it, it comes into being. I invite you to invent hope with me each day. May we continue moving forward on this road, linked arm in arm, hand in hand, that we may travel this road together.
Go now in peace, go now in peace. May the light of love surround you everywhere, everywhere you may go. Go now in peace, go now in peace. May the light of love surround you everywhere, everywhere you may go.
I hope that you found meaning in today's service. Again, I invite you to consider joining us sometime on Sunday morning when we gather for worship as a community. The service starts at 10:30 a.m. on Zoom. You are also welcome to drop into our Zoom room coffee hour any Sunday at 11:30 for friendly conversation. If you are new to the area or just learning about Unitarian Universalism, we'd love to meet you in one of our newcomer discussions, which are held on the second Sunday of each month at 12:15. Please refer to our website for more information on how to connect with us on Zoom. If you use the Connect Online button, it will take you directly to any of our activities. We look forward to meeting you.